After decades of preaching prosperity, healing, and unshakable faith, the unthinkable has now come to light. At 72, Bishop Hilliard's family has confirmed heartbreaking news that has sent shockwaves through the entire church community. What was once whispered behind closed doors is now publicly acknowledged, and this isn't just another controversy. It's a devastating turning point in the legacy of a man once seen as untouchable. The silence is broken, and nothing will ever be the same again. This is the kind of story that doesn't just shock, it shakes the very foundations of faith. When people hear the name Bishop Hilliard, they think power, prosperity, private jets, and pulpits packed wall to wall with believers hanging on to his every word. A man who rose from nothing and built an empire of faith, influence, and undeniable presence. But now, at 72, behind the polished sermons and perfectly curated social media, a heartbreaking truth has surfaced, one that even his most loyal followers didn't see coming. The man who once preached about miracles is now facing a battle that not even faith alone could hold back, and his family has finally decided to speak out. In this video, we uncover the truth, the whispers from the pulpit, the sudden silence from leadership, and the painful confirmation that has left his ministry in shock. You'll hear what the Hilliard family has revealed, the private struggles that were carefully hidden, and the moment everything changed. Is this truly the end of an era? Or is it the beginning of a painful but necessary reckoning? Stay with us, because what you're about to discover will not only leave you speechless, it will change how you see one of the most iconic figures in modern ministry forever. He founded New Light Christian Center Church, a massive ministry well known for its sizable membership, stirring sermons, and yes, his private aircraft and opulent lifestyle, which garnered national attention. In a voice that Bishop Hilliard established an empire based on the prosperity gospel doctrines, commanding respect and a vision that united people from all generations. However, such influence was accompanied by rumors and scrutiny. Subtle rumors about his health started to circulate during the previous 10 years. He was preaching less frequently, as the congregation noted. He has slowed his public appearances. Additionally, many wondered why the bishop was discreetly retreating while his daughter, Pastor Irish Hilliard, was taking the lead. At first, the family attributed it to deliberate change and spiritual relaxation. However, those closest to him realized something was seriously amiss behind the scenes. Sources inside the church claimed that employees were told not to bring up the bishop's health. He appeared noticeably weaker in private. Some even claimed that he was losing entire discussions, lectures, and names. The sharp-witted, charismatic bishop who had inspired many was gradually fading. However, as of right now, nothing has been verified. At last there was silence. The Hilliard family was unable to conceal the truth any longer after months, some say years, of growing conjecture and inward anxiety. A wave of pressure from churchgoers, close friends, local authorities, and even other pastors who had become concerned about Bishop Hilliard's waning influence grew out of what had begun as whispers in the congregation. Then the moment that everyone had been anticipating arrived. The bishop's daughter and successor, Pastor Irish Hilliard, seemed solemn yet calm in a very moving Facebook Live video. She finally verified what many had dreaded, her voice shaking with emotion and tears in her eyes. A serious neurological disorder had been plaguing Bishop Hilliard, progressively robbing him of his strength, his ability to speak, and now even his memory. It was more than aging, it was aggressive and degenerative. We wished to keep him safe. We wanted to provide him with the respect and tranquility he is due, Irisha clarified during the show. However, we are also aware that openness is something our church family deserves. My father's leadership abilities have deteriorated. On some days, he hardly recognizes us. However, his spirit remains unwavering. The religious community was rocked by this devastating announcement. Many members who had grown up witnessing the bishop preach with fire in his bones and lead a powerful revival were now faced with the sobering realization that a man they had once believed to be unbeatable now required 24-hour care. A number of clergymen, including close associates such as Bishop T.D. Jakes and Dr. Cindy Trim, sent condolences and words of support. Others remained silent, unable to comprehend the demise of such a strong spiritual leader. Irisha added to the heartache by disclosing that the family had been quietly getting ready for this day for more than a year. They hired private and home nurses, To ensure a smooth transition and to keep the public from realizing how serious the situation had become, security was increased around the bishop's estate, and even church operations were gradually moved under new leadership. The entire New Light congregation, as well as a large portion of the Christian community at large, was devastated by the revelation of the truth, not because the bishop had deceased, but because the man they knew no longer actually existed in the way they remembered him. The moment the live stream finished, the internet erupted. Comments rushed in, some with prayers, some with confusion, some with grief. What had once been a whisper behind church pews became the prevailing discourse across the Christian social media realm. TikTokers, YouTubers, and Instagram influencers in the faith-based community all uploaded their own sad tributes, shared old sermons, and expressed disbelief at the formal confirmation of Bishop Ivy Hilliard's physical condition. Churches across Houston, Dallas, and even as far as Atlanta began organizing prayer vigils. Some pastors even interrupted their scheduled Sunday sermons to officially address the news. One particular pastor in Detroit was quoted saying, "A general has fallen, not in death, but in voice and mind. This is our time to carry his torch." Longtime members of New Light Church were notably touched. One elderly woman, who had been a part of the church since 1988, remarked through tears, "We watched him expand this ministry from a small congregation to a global movement. To see him now unable to remember even his own sermons, it's like losing a part of our soul." But the sadness didn't just remain in pews or prayer circles. It also stirred controversy. Some critics began questioning why the Hilliard family had waited so long to be transparent. A few angry voices online accused the ministry of hiding the truth to maintain power, money, and control over the congregation. Why were we still donating and sowing seeds while the man behind the pulpit wasn't even mentally there anymore? One post read, which garnered thousands of likes and shares. Others pushed back hard against this backlash, arguing that the family had every right to protect their patriarch's dignity and legacy. A popular gospel radio presenter joined in, declaring, "The Hilliards owe no one a play-by-play of their grief. What they've given the body of Christ is more than most. Let them grieve and lead in peace." Meanwhile, prominent celebrities and gospel artists joined the national outcry of love and prayer. Gospel legends like Yolanda Adams, Donnie McClurkin, and Marvin Sapp shared heartfelt messages, with Yolanda calling him a father to a generation of preachers and Donnie stating, "This isn't just about a man, it's about a movement that changed how we preach, how we believe, and how we grow churches." Even former critics of the prosperity gospel took a moment to pay respect. In the days that followed, an outpouring of old video clips of Bishop Wawari Hilliard went viral. His infamous declarations of faith, his teachings on seed sowing, and his thunderous sermons calling people to rise beyond poverty and doubt. People were mourning an era, not just a man. And one woman stood at the center of the emotional storm, Iricia Hilliard, the daughter of Bishop Dar's full wife Hilliard. The contrast between his lively, active past and his frail present state struck deep within many. Her recent appearance during the official live stream was anything but a formality. She had been by her father's side for years, watching, learning, and serving. Many in the congregation already saw her as his natural successor, but no one had anticipated that she would be forced into this role under such painful circumstances. In addition to being a farewell, it was a declaration of spiritual war. "My father is still with us," Iricia remarked, her voice shaking. "However, the man you all knew, the one who boldly spoke the word, is engaged in a conflict we never anticipated. And now I have to take charge as this house's shepherd as well as his daughter." The room fell silent, but behind her strength was a woman carrying a mountain of pain. In private, family sources revealed that Iricia had been the one taking care of Bishop Hilliard most days, watching him forget names, become confused by his own reflection, and occasionally even lose his sense of direction. Some people wept, while others applauded in reverent support. It was the kind of moment that turns someone from background leader to center stage warrior. According to one person who wished to remain anonymous, she had a breakdown last month. Broke down completely. In private, she was seeing her hero vanish in real time, while in public, she kept everything together. No daughter should have to carry this burden alone, especially not in front of millions of fans and detractors. Nevertheless, Irisha took her father's place with dignity, ferocity, and respect. Following the formal announcement, she launched a new ministry campaign called the Legacy Lives, a faith-based initiative aimed at upholding her father's teachings, motivating the upcoming generation of leaders, and serving as a reminder to the world that God's power endures even in the face of suffering. Despite the public's admiration, Irisha now has to tread carefully. Within the church, some elders continue to cling to the past. Some subtly criticize her management approach. Others question whether the church will abandon the prosperity gospel image that her father painstakingly cultivated. Is she capable of stepping into those shoes? Turned into the silent mutter during private religious gatherings. But according to those closest to her, skepticism just makes her stronger. She isn't come to take her father's place. According to a church elder who has served under both father and daughter, she is here to honor him, protect him, and carry on the mission. Outside of New Light Church, many members of the religious world, particularly women in ministry, viewed Irisha's ascent as a daring illustration of what true leadership and change look like. It was a woman who was severely wounded and carrying the torch with dignity and tears in her eyes, not a hostile takeover or a collapsing institution, not to mention the conflict that exists within the Christian community as a whole. Because of Irisha's charismatic energy, some conservative pastors started to express fear that she may steer the church into unknown theological ground. In contrast to the biblical idea of government by divine appointment, some accuse the Hilliard family of creating a family dynasty. However, Irisha responded with a straightforward Instagram story post that said, "My appointment wasn't given by man. It was birthed through sacrifice." This was a powerful start to the conflict between spiritual succession, heritage, sorrow, and gender roles in the church. It was no longer just a local Houston story, though, as news of Bishop Barvey Hilliard's health issues spread far beyond the walls of New Light Church. And Irisha saw it as more than just a leadership issue. From young believers who had only recently learned about Hilliard's teachings on YouTube and Instagram to longtime churchgoers who had watched him on TV for decades, everyone had something to say, and not all of it was positive. A woman on Facebook wrote, "This man taught me to believe that I was more than just a paycheck away from poverty." For many, Bishop Hilliard was more than just a preacher. He was a spiritual father, a man who helped shape their understanding of faith, abundance, and divine authority. I don't care what people say about prosperity preachers. Read another widely shared tweet. "He helped me speak life into my situation, praying for him and his family with all my heart. When I was about to give up on everything, Bishop Ivy Hilliard gave me confidence." TikTok, Reddit discussions, and even the comment sections of old sermons were inundated with these sincere sentiments. Using the hashtag #PrayForBishopHilliard, some users even started reposting old videos of Hilliard speaking about faith and favor, which briefly became popular on Christian Twitter. However, there was a strong response after that. Long silent critics abruptly came out again, irate, outspoken, and unvarnished. They weren't merely doubtful. They were criticizing what they perceived to be showbiz-style churches, private jet theology, and decades of manipulation. One well-known Christian YouTuber didn't mince words. "They urge us to offer prayers for the bishop, who is currently ill." When people were sacrificing their rent while he showed off a brand new Bentley every year, where was the same concern? "Don't play God." Others expressed similar opinions in the comments section. How was he not shielded from this by his faith? Did he not preach that? Perhaps the Lord is bringing this entire empire to light. The shepherds always fly first class, but the sheep always end up bleeding. It turned into an ideological battleground. Even more shockingly, some former members of the New Light Church came up with heartbreaking accounts of how they felt ignored, pushed away, and degraded when they were unable to contribute financially to the church's mission. In a widely shared Facebook post, a former choir member said, "A church leader once informed me that I wasn't walking in obedience if I wasn't giving at least 10% of my gross income." These revelations were startling. For every person praying for Bishop Hilliard's recovery, there was another facing the spiritual trauma they felt they had experienced under his teachings. The contrast between hope and hurt, loyalty and disillusionment, was stark. "I left church crying more Sundays than not." One thing stood out among the confusion, though. Bishop IV of Hilliard was more than just a man. He was a movement that had impacted thousands of people, for better or worse, and now, As his health deteriorated, people had to consider the effects of his legacy. Was he a controversial figure who conflated his religious calling with material excess, or was he a man of God who transformed lives via faith and empowerment? Perhaps, just perhaps, he was both. However, for those who sat in those pews, watched those broadcasts, made those offerings, or cried in private, this was more than just a news story, it was personal. And the discussions haven't ended indeed, they've just started. Every mega ministry has a stronghold of riches, power, and, if we're being completely honest, controversy. Let's start with the headlines that never ceased raising eyebrows. Bishop Hilliard, the man who was once hailed as God's architect of abundance, left behind a trail of opulence that was not only spiritual, but also material. Yes, you read correctly. This was the pastor who once offered upgrade your ride blessings. Then there was the notorious $2.5 million helicopter parked like a divine chariot in full view of his congregation, symbolizing what many saw as heaven on earth and what others saw as a dangerous blend of gospel and greed. Critics exploded online, calling it manipulative because it urged followers to sow a $52 seed to believe God for a luxury car. While some devoted members testified that miracles did follow, the silence from the pulpit and the stage was deafening when the bishop's health started to deteriorate. And let's not forget the private jet, the opulent homes, the tailored suits, and yes, the sermons wrapped in phrases like kingdom wealth and divine acceleration that frequently sounded more like inspirational business seminars than altar calls. Some silently questioned whether the empire was starting to fall apart, while others saw that the church's leadership, especially his daughter, Dr. Irisha Hilliard, had become even more evasive, making claims that sounded more like publicity than spiritual insight. Where were the voices of accountability? Their leader was human, frail, and facing the same mortality he once preached victory over. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of it all was what transpired next. Many churchgoers were left in the pews, bewildered and heartbroken, uncertain whether to continue believing for miracles or finally come to terms with the very real truth. In a recent podcast appearance, a former deacon who worked for Hilliard for more than 15 years broke his silence. We were told not to ask questions. When the money was tight, we were encouraged to give more, fast more, believe more. However, when the bishop became ill, no one spoke, and we were simply expected to continue sowing and praying. The media ministry received dozens of mails requesting updates, according to another unnamed source. When they discovered the bishop was secretly battling sickness, several loyal benefactors even asked for their promises to be refunded. They were left in the dark and felt deceived. Others, however, rejected the criticism, claiming that it was rude and spiritually immature to question a man of God at his most vulnerable moment. The tension in Bishop the Five Hilliards stems from the fact that it is not solely about the ascent or decline of a single individual. It concerns the brittle and defective system of American megachurches. How we erect altars around charismatic leaders, give them undeserved expectations, and then crucify them when they display weakness. It's about the thousands of people who are caught in the crossfire between popularity and faith, as well as the blessings and responsibilities of spiritual notoriety. The world now watches and waits as the Hilliard legacy enters its most uncertain chapter. Will the church welcome more truth into its folds? Will the family voice their concerns and deal with the mounting discomfort? Will there ever be spiritual as well as physical healing? This isn't the end, that much is certain. It's the unsettling start of a more significant reckoning, not only for the New Light Church, but for any congregation that has ever mistaken silence for obedience and luxury for anointing. Additionally, the voices of individuals who have endured silent suffering under institutions that valued appearance over a close relationship with God are now being heard.